Hello, and welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, January 8th, 2020. First time I said that out loud. I, as usual, want to make sure that I am, in fact, broadcasting because I keep forgetting to check on such things. But let's see. We popped out the chat. Did we really? Yes, I guess we did. Here we go. So feel free to drop me a line. And okay, good. You're here. Yes. Good morning to people around me. Good evening to those of you in Europe, and good night to those of you in Asia, I guess. Evening also. All right, so the topic that I was going to talk about, or am going to talk about some today, is MuseScore 3.4, which is in a beta release right now. And so I want to talk about some of the things that are coming, some of which is already there, some of which is maybe more to come before the final release. It's not necessarily a huge release in terms of lots of new features, so there's not a whole lot for me to show you, but it's maybe a sign of some things to come that are definitely worth knowing about. So let me start by bringing you over to where I'm actually starting MuseScore up. And you'll see, all right, so I have done a factory reset so that it's as if you're starting for the first time. So you can see one of the things that's going to be new. So it's going to let you select all the same stuff that it's always done, selecting some default things. I'm going to say no on the tours. When it first starts up, it is going to... Okay. Oh, that's right, because I'm using a development version. I'm sorry about that. If I were actually running the actual beta version, which I'm not for various reasons, because I want to show some things that have been added since, you would have seen a dialog asking if you consent to transmitting some information. So this is one of the things that I want to talk about because it's gonna surprise some people the first time they see this. And you've seen this in a zillion programs, right? Almost any program you run, first time you start it up says, is it okay if we collect some information? And sometimes I say yes, sometimes I say no, and I don't really think about why. And Happy New Year to you, Colleen. Hopefully see you at rehearsal tonight. Um, so I now that I'm on the other side of this, I can tell you exactly what this information is good for. It's not collecting personal information. It's not ransacking your hard disk looking for credit card info or anything like that. It's open source. You're welcome to look at the source to see what it's doing. But it's collecting information on how you actually use the program so that we can understand some things better and help us in the development. So, can you run the beta without interfering with your current version? Yes, you can. It will install separately. The only things that I think it will share preferences. So I think set a if you set a preference in one, it'll also get set in the other. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think that's the case. And if you change which workspace you're in one, I think, or create a workspace in one, it'll be visible in the other. So they're sharing information, but they can coexist. I think that's the way I would put it. Okay, so this information that is available to be collected is, I guess, the best way I would put that. If I go to preferences, you'll see this option here that says send anonymous telemetry data to MuseScore. That's the option that will allow you to turn it on or off. But the first time you start it, it will give you the option of it's not going to sign you up for it without your consent. But because I'm using a development version here, that's not actually going to do anything. So what it's doing is doing things like telling us, oh, you clicked the quarter note button, you typed the letter N, you did whatever. And the reason this is really useful, I've often, long, for many years, wished we had access to this sort of information because, we don't know such basic things as, do most people entering notes do it the way I do it, by pressing N and then C, D, E, F, G? Or do most people do what I assume pretty much all beginners do, at least, which is kind of point the mouse where they want the note? You see how much slower this is, right? So uh, I mean, if you do it more often than I do, and it might be a little faster for you. But in general, typing is really fast, and we sort of expect that power users will be typing to enter notes, but we don't know that. We don't know that they really are, and we don't know at what point in people's experience do they start changing from clicking, which I assume most people do at first, to typing. So these are the types of things we want to know the answers to. Not just that, but a million other things. How many people actually use the inspector here? Or do people just close it and then never use it? Or do they open and close it regularly, right? That's another interesting question. All sorts of interesting questions that we would want to know in order to help us develop things better. By the way, before I forget, I'm going to switch from basic to advanced workspace. Um, and so I get all my full set of palettes, because remember when I started this with a factory reset. Let me come back and make sure I'm checking on chats. Okay, good. Um, I usually have that up on my phone, but I forgot today. But I can get that real quick. I can get it while I'm talking, in fact. So that's, unless people have questions about that, I would just say I encourage people to just go ahead and say yes to that. It's not gonna slow anything down. It's not gonna collect any personal information. It's not gonna do anything bad. It's just gonna really help us in the development of the program. So feel free to say no. Plenty of other people will say yes, and we'll still get good data. But it's useful data as we're developing things. And in particular, the kinds of things that it's going to help us develop are design sorts of things, which have to do with like deciding, well, like should the inspector even show up by default? Or should it be closed? Should it be like minimized and then you pop it open, right? These are design decisions that would be influenced by how people actually use the program, or, education. Like if people aren't using the inspector, well, that means we're not, maybe we're not doing a good enough job of telling people that what it's useful for. Or the fact that it takes up so much space, people do just close it and then aren't even aware that it's useful. Whereas if it was smaller, maybe people would be more aware. So anyhow, design decisions are some of the big things that we would be making potentially. Not like getting rid of a feature because it's not used very often. We wouldn't do that, but because everything that's there is there for a reason. But maybe tweaking how it's presented. And so I want to transition to talking about the subject of the design. Any aspects of the score being set. So to be honest, I do not know. My guess is no, that the only thing is the keystrokes themselves. I would have to look at the source because I didn't develop that. So that's something that it's a good question, and I will make a note to myself to just take a look at more about what's being collected. Of course, what's collected today might not be the same as what's collected, next week or next month or next year. So, but again, being open source, we can be fully transparent about this in a way that, when Microsoft says that they're doing it or Google says they're doing it, you don't know what they're collecting. It's always going to be possible. And so if anyone tried to put anything in there that wasn't cool, a million people, not a million, 100 people who have access to the source would see it and complain. So I'm not going to be one of those people myself because I got other things to deal with. But there's plenty of people who love monitoring stuff like that. But I will check that for you just to see, because that is an interesting question. Okay, so design, as I mentioned, is really the next big topic, and you don't see anything different right now in this, because the design changes that are actually in 3.4 are fairly small, but kind of significant. Like it's not as big as the palette change. You may remember in previous in 3.3 we changed how the palettes work to make some things like customizing palettes be easier. Now you just drag things around to rearrange them and drag the palettes up and down. A lot of things became easier to customize in the palettes. The thing that's now changed is if you want to actually change like to a different clef, instead of double click, single click does it. So that is a design change. That single click now operates the palette, but not just the palette. Also, if I click, let me put in, the bar line, for instance. It used to be, if I wanted to edit this bar line, I needed to double click it. Now, when I single click it, I get handles. And then I can change the handles and, well, I don't think I can do anything with that bar line except extend it to another staff, and there's not one. If I added a hairpin, then it's a little more obvious. As I click the hairpin, the handles appear, so you see right away that it's editable, and then you can click whichever handle you want to change and do what you want to change with it. Right? Use the keyboard when doing this. This is something that we expect to be able to improve now. It's always been the case that if you just try to make your crescendo longer by just dragging it, you see it's still attached to the same place, and so it doesn't actually work. I mean, it gets longer, but it won't affect the playback in the same way, and it won't do the right things if later on the score is reformatted and there's a line break here. So the correct way to extend a hairpin is with the arrow keys like this, but that's hard shift plus arrow keys at that, and people don't recognize that. They don't know that. That's not easy to discover. So we want it to be the case that dragging it will do the job. So this is like a step in that direction. I'm not sure if that one will make it into 3.4 or if it'll come in a a future version. But anyhow, that's sorry, I'm getting up. I never finished getting the chat up over here, and I want to do that. Okay, there we go. Okay, clicking on a clef, wanting to move it. All right, so if you want to move the clef, like just move it, you don't release it. So if you click it, I mean, if you don't have a clef selected in the score, clicking this isn't going to happen. All right, clicking this isn't going to just add it unless you've already selected something in the score. But if you're customizing the palette, you wouldn't normally click first and then release. You would click and drag, and that, I would like to think, is not going to change. So if I click and drag, no, it still doesn't apply it. So that should be fine. Okay. So yes, as you click things, they will go. They're not fully in edit mode, but the handles appear so that you can see them. And now you can press Tab or and start using the keyboard or the mouse to make the adjustments you want to make. One of the things that also will lead to is allowing you maybe to make adjustments to several items at once, because now you don't need to double click them and put them in edit mode to see the handles. You notice it doesn't actually say we're in edit mode down here in the status bar, because we're not. That concept has changed. Yeah, the principle is it will allow for things. So right now it's a small change where you see handles, and that's really just about it. By the way, that also happens if you're using the shortcuts for accessibility, like Alt left and right to move one element at a time. So notice it's going from, let me turn the sound up here. I forgot. I like it on 32 is where we've decided. Okay. So I'm on the C. Alt right takes me to the crescendo and allows the handles to be displayed, which is also going to be good for accessibility, because now Tab will allow people to edit it. Not that, I mean, if you're a blind user, you probably won't see where the handle is, and unless you maybe have limited vision. But in any case, you can start editing it without needing to click it. So anyhow, Alt-Right takes you to the hairpin, Alt-Right again to the note. So this hasn't changed just because the handles appear. So really it's a fairly innocuous change, but it's a sign of some things to come. And another aspect of this, so I mentioned design, a big part of this is that I've alluded to this before when I talked about the palette design, but Martin Curie, alias Tentacruel, who produced this fairly infamous series of videos critiquing various music programs, their user interfaces, Sibelius and the MuseScore. He is now officially our head of design. I think that's his title, or something like that. So he had made some proposals that made their way into MuseScore 3.3, like this general palette reorganization, and also a couple other ones, like the fact that I believe with nothing selected, I can just select a duration and it will automatically put me into note input mode, because realistically that's what most beginners do. The first thing they do is they see some note icons and like, let me start entering some notes. So that was something that Martin had designed for us. Also, a change in how accidentals work, which is a change that we have to adjust to, but it's really objectively better. And that is when you're entering accidentals, it used to be the case that if I wanted to enter a C sharp, I would do C, then hit the sharp button. But that's not the way anything else works, right? That's not the way the durations work. That's not the way the dots work. It's not the way the voice buttons work. Those all work by selecting them before entering the note. So that is now the case with the accidentals too. You select the accidental, then enter a note, and it enters the thing. So it makes it more consistent and therefore more predictable to beginners especially. And yeah, the rest of us just have to get used to it. Personally, I almost never use those buttons. I use the arrow keys because you all know I'm a keyboard guy. So anyhow, Martin had designed that as sort of a design proposal when, there wasn't necessarily this whole official head of design thing going on. But now that's official, we can say that. So Martin is our head of design, and he came up with this design involving the single click, and he's got a lot more ideas that are still being worked on, that he's still working on the design ideas, or that he has put out that are still being implemented. So you'll be hearing a lot more about Martin's design ideas. I mean, that's what he is. He's a professional designer, he's worked for Microsoft and other pretty big companies before. So that's really, as far as new stuff, the telemetry and this thing with the single click are two of the big things. One of the other ones that's kind of related, and really the only other change, is that Howard, are you here, by the way? Because Howard participates sometimes, and he oh, thanks. So Howard Chang, who participates in these sometimes, these cafes, implemented one of the other things that has been bugging us for a while that Martin has kind of nicked us over, and that is the number of things that are kind of buried in the right-click menu. Or, for that matter, like when I mentioned that extending a crescendo, does double click still? I guess it still does work. That you need to use shift plus right arrow. Well, there's no way you would know that if you didn't just read the handbook. So that's really a fail on our part. We implemented something that is impossible to figure out how to work right away. So, but there's a lot of things in MuseScore that can only be accessed by right-clicking them. I shouldn't say a lot, because we've been steadily eliminating them, steadily taking things like everything that's in the inspector. Used to be you'd have to right-click this hairpin, and then there would be a hairpin properties dialog that showed up. That's the way it was, years ago. So gradually over the years, we've been eliminating all those things that used to be, we still have right-click menus as shortcuts to get places, but it's no longer going to be the only way to access different features. So as an example of something that formerly required that, it used to be the case that if you wanted to change, say, the beaming rules, like let me enter these as eighth notes. You enter eighth notes, by default they're beamed in fours. What if you want the default to be beamed in twos? Well, it used to be the case that you would right-click the time signature and go to time signature properties. And then that would bring up this dialog that allows you to change the default beaming. So that was the old way, and it still works. However, it is now the case that by clicking the 4-4, we didn't put that entire dialog in here because, boy, that's a lot of stuff to try to cram into the inspector. But at least there's properties. So it's visible, it's discoverable. It doesn't require you to think about right-clicking. Because realistically, we know that especially on Mac, Mac mice have traditionally never had a right button, so Mac applications are traditionally built to not require that action. Now on a Mac you can right click by control click, or if you've got a touchpad, as most of us do, I guess at this point working on laptops, it's two-finger tap is usually the right click. I think, well, control click does it also on most laptops, although nope, not on this one. Control click did not do a right click, so only two-finger tap does on this particular laptop. So we want to move more things into the inspector. So sometimes it's just going to mean putting a button for properties to get there, because putting that entire dialog in there, it's kind of too much. But for other things, we've actually moved them in. Like I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the section break properties. So let me take advantage of my lovely single click to add a section break. It used to be the case that there was a section break properties dialog. Well, now the property, and it just had these three things in it. Well, these are three easy things to put in the inspector. So now they're in the inspector. So um, that's one of the things that's actually in the inspector. So a few other things are that way too. So gradually we're trying to make things more discoverable. I think that's maybe one of the key words actually that you can expect to be hearing a lot. Discoverable. We want more things discoverable because there's a whole lot of features that MuseScore has that people don't discover. Yeah, so for time signature properties, that button's probably all we're ever going to do. I think for a few others, we put the button there because it was going to be too much work to do more than that, but we see, the potential. Like, I believe if I come here and let's see, I believe under the arpeggios, no, it's under articulations, the bend. If I add myself oh, no, he moved that in there. What do you know? Okay, so the bend properties are in here and not, in fact, in a separate dialog. I was thinking this is one where he just did a button also, because this used to be a separate dialog. Nice job, Howard. I guess you're not here today. Actually, let's go. Let me just give some props to Howard over here in the chat. This is the developer chat. There we go. So now he's aware. Yeah, that's the stuff that's new. So I think there might be a few other little things like this still to come. Little, moving something else into the inspector that's not there yet. Tweaks to how the single click thing works. I'm also still continually working on accessibility, as is Peter Jonas in England, and so. We are continuing to make improvements to accessibility. I don't have any major anything to share. We've made a few little tweaks here and there. There's some stuff that Peter and I are both working on that's not necessarily going to be in 3.4. It might be, might not be, it might be in some future release. But as just a hint, we are working on improving the palette navigation further, because, for instance, right now, if I navigate, let's see, is this going to work or is this going to crash? I got to think about, I don't have the screen reader on. So if I start using the down arrow, it moves through the palettes. If I move this way using the right arrow, it moves one element at a time. But if I use the down arrow within a palette, you see it's literally moving down. Well, if you're blind, the fact that this is a table, that means nothing to you. A blind user expects up and down arrow to work just like left and right, basically, when moving through a table, to move it one cell at a time. Unless it's a table that literally has meaning, the columns have meaning, then you expect down to move through a column. But these columns don't have meaning. That's just how big the table happens to be, right? As I resize the palette, suddenly the things get different sized. While I'm broadcasting, my computer responds slowly. So anyhow, that navigation is working on being improved. I'm also, I would say, close to having MuseScore working with other screen readers other than NVDA. JAWS is close. Well, I have JAWS partially working. We're hoping to get Windows Narrator and VoiceOver working, and hopefully Orca. And we've said this for a while, but I'm actually making some headway now because I've met up with some JAWS people who do JAWS development, not developing JAWS, but doing what's called scripting to help JAWS work with other programs who are MuseScore users and JAWS users, and I've been working with them, and one of them turned out to live just like 10 miles from me, which is amazing, and I just found this out like 2 days ago. So I'm really looking forward to meeting with him and seeing what we can iron out as far as that goes. So yeah, there will be some further accessibility improvements to come. Note Performer is something that In order to support, we would need to be able to access some technologies that, as far as I know, are not open source, and in any case are also very difficult to implement. So it does not seem to be in the cards, because if an open source program cannot use non-open source code in it, or libraries or things, it's got to be open source all the way. It's part of how the whole open source licensing model works. So I think it is the case that Note Performer, unless Note Performer changes how they interface with programs to only use open source interfaces, I'm pretty sure we would not be able to support Note Performer directly. However, we do support both MIDI out and we support Jack. Jack is another thing. So I say we support Jack, but there are some issues. Like on Windows, apparently it only works with the 32-bit version, not the 64-bit version, because of an issue with what library we're building with. And we've at least identified that. Maybe we'll get that working, fixed for 3.4. Oh, and if you use Jack, it allows MuseScore to communicate with a digital audio workstation, and then you can load up whatever stuff that's specific to that workstation, and if Note Performer can work with that, great. But yeah, I don't think there's any way we can directly integrate with that. So with regard to Jack, we know on Windows it's not working. We believe it's works with 32-bit but not 64-bit, or the issue is just with one library in particular. It's a little funny because depending on whose system you test on, you get different results. On Linux, we've discovered a very simple, really silly issue with the app image version on Linux. And I can tell you, if any of you are watching this and happen to be interested in Jack on Linux, it's so silly and trivial. And we hope to be able to fix the app image for this, and also fix the app image to be able to access printers, which was another trivial, stupid thing that got omitted. But to get Jack to work, the problem is a utility called ldconfig has to be in your path. And on some Linux distributions it is, on other ones it isn't. So on the version that I use on my Linux system, it's in /sbin. So all you have to do is make sure sbin is in your path. If sbin is in your path, then ldconfig will be found by the app image, and it will be able to do what it needs to do to load the Jack library, and Jack should work. So there's a number of little niggling things like that maybe we'll also be able to get into 3.4, if not probably 3.4.1 or whatever. That's some more information on things being worked on. As I mentioned, Martin's got all sorts of ideas for other improvements to the user interface, as far as just making things more discoverable, making better use of screen real estate, etc. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing. In fact, I'm going to be having a chat with him later this week to talk about some of his ideas that he's working on. And so yeah, hopefully at some point we'll be able to share some of those. I think I've told you what I need to tell you about what's coming. So it's not a whole lot new. It's not going to be a major new release in that way, in any way that you really have to adjust to it. It's just going to be some nice little improvements. So I'm totally into just answering whatever other questions people might have. So any time frame thought playback just one part of a measure. Okay, I assume what you mean is you want to be able to select a range of notes like this and say, just play that, right? Is that what you mean? I can tell you can do that. Turn on loop. So then the trick is just turn on the loop and then stop it. Okay, I went a little over. So there's that. So if that's what you mean, great. Now, if you mean you've got several staves, like you've got a score for several instruments, and you want to select just one instrument and then, play just that instrument, this was actually implemented a couple releases ago, but it replaced the regular playback. So if you happen to have a measure selected, it would only play back that instrument, and people found that disorienting and distracting, and so it was pulled back. Now, to me, that was a shame that we pulled it back from that. I think we should have just made it, be a separate command, like a play button and then a second play button that says play selection, or a little drop down like we do for the note input, or have it be shift plus that to play back just the selection. Or just live with that and just tell people to get in the habit of unselecting before they hit playback. I don't know. There's a lot of, or make that be the thing that requires shift. Lots of ways we could have dealt with it. Anyhow, the code is there. I have no doubt, and we were just talking about this a couple days ago. I have no doubt whatsoever it's going to come back. Okay, so what do you mean then if you mean not full playback mode? Oh, so not just a selection. You mean what's called scrubbing playback in Finale, or well, I don't know if Finale calls it that, but it's a common term for it in other applications, where it's following the cursor. No, I mean that's a common request. It's not easily doable the way we have implemented the playback, because really what happens is we just calculate an entire MIDI stream and then send it off and say, here, play that thing back. So there's not a straightforward way to make that happen. I'm not saying there's not a straightforward way, doesn't mean impossible. It just means not straightforward. So yeah, it's something that I could see wanting to do at some point, but it's not there. And not, I mean, there's not a framework to make it happen. Okay, have we considered making the left bar to hide automatically and come up? Oh, this is one that actually, yes, we have considered this. You mean the palettes here, right? So first of all, I can already tell you that F9 will pop it up and down. It's been proposed specifically by Peter Jonas, the guy working on accessibility stuff along with me in England. Peter has definitely proposed this model where as soon as you apply, say, a fermata like that, it would just close the palette or collapse it, and then maybe open up again, just like the Windows taskbar does. And that has been proposed, and I think he's worked a little bit on implementing it. There's some resistance to the idea because a lot of people like to see the palette at all time, but to me, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I could totally see that. Instead of collapsing, I could also see it just closing. I mean, really, the palettes could be a modal dialog, right? I mean, it could be, by modal, I mean it pops up, and then, like, for instance, the way the page settings dialog is modal, right? While it's up here, you can't actually click in the score, nothing happens. Ooh, something did. No, nothing happens. That's just the Windows sound. And then when you click OK, it does the thing. So we could make the palettes be that way also, or at least make it possible to make it that way, so that if you wanted it to be that way, you would open the palette, do what you wanted, and then it would close itself. Hopefully just close itself. You wouldn't have to apply the thing, then hit OK. So having it be modal, so it opens and then closes as soon as you apply something, or having it be collapsible, definitely on the radar. No specific plans. I would be very surprised to see anything like that in 3.4. But yeah, that is the sort of thing we are looking at. Yeah, good question. And these are great times for these types of suggestions because, as I said, Martin is working on design ideas, and I should make notes to myself. So I think best way to take a note to myself right now is the old pencil and paper method. So far, I've note to myself collapse palette and the thing about telemetry. Does it collect score data? Because yeah, even if it collected information about the score, that includes, maybe your name as composer, so that's some identifying information that maybe is maybe not the best for it to be there. Those are the two things that I sort of say, oh yeah, I want to take a look at and think about. I've now written those in my notes here. What else we got? The choice there to have it be open or modal. Yeah, because I don't think I would literally want modal. I think, but that the thing is, as a blind user, and this is coming from an accessibility perspective, that would not be the idea that the thing, moving the mouse over to expand it. That's not a blind user methodology. You do something, you click it, and you expect it to just basically go away when you're done with it, because you're not using the mouse to do any of this. On the other hand, the fact that it's taking up screen space doesn't get in your way either. It's more about how the keyboard navigation works when you transfer focus to it. What happens when you then apply the thing? Is it still there as far as keyboard focus is concerned? Because right now it is. Right now, if I click this G and I hit Shift Tab, focus, as you can see, moved right here to the search box. So that even though I didn't specifically open the palette, it's there in the tab order. And maybe, maybe you don't want that. Maybe you really want to get to the toolbar. And right now you'll have to press Shift Tab a few more times. And now you can see. Can you see? I can see. Yeah, here's the camera icon has got the focus now. Now the concert pitch does. I have no idea where it just went from there. If I had my screen reader on, it would be reading it, so I wouldn't have to be relying on seeing the highlighting. But to be honest, I have no... Oh, it's in the inspector. Check that out. Okay, so there you go. The tab order between the toolbars and the inspector is not necessarily always what we would want it. Okay. Chord symbol playback. Okay, so the deal with chord symbol playback, this is fully implemented. It is there in the code, was implemented over the summer as part of the Google Summer of Code. It's just sort of awaiting people to be able to give it a full review to make sure it, really works as advertised, doesn't have bugs that we would need that would prevent it from going out, and, make sure that it's basically good. I mentored that project, so I looked at the code enough to see that, I'm basically happy with it, but that's not the same as a really formal code review. So that is something that I would have loved to have seen for 3.4 and kind of thought it was going to happen, but I think the deal is this telemetry thing, they really wanted to start getting that information in sooner rather than later so that we can start, as we're working on future design ideas, have that telemetry data, coming in to start looking at. So I think they wanted to get the telemetry stuff in sooner rather than later. So a couple things like the chord symbol playback and a couple other things that originally were looking like maybe they were going to be in 3.4 are now, now we'll look at them for 3.5. But absolutely, it's another one of these things that's in the cards, basically already implemented. So yes, you will be seeing it, no doubt. Anything else, guys? This is good. I like this. It's been very useful to me to hear the kinds of things you guys are asking, and it all kind of feels on topic as far as like somehow dealing with these design issues. Not that it really matters. You could ask me anything, and I'm happy to answer it. But I do like to have a topic and then have some information about that topic here. So let me just mention just a couple other things. Coming up, let's see. Next month, in beginning of February, first weekend of February, is going to be the FOSDEM, FOSDEM, Free Open Source Developers European Meeting, something like that. So it's basically a conference in Europe, the E of FOSDEM, a conference in Europe that's an annual event for developers of open source software. And it's a pretty big event. I went to it for the first time last year. I'm going to be going again this year. And actually, along with Peter, we're going to be presenting, not a paper, it's not that formal of a conference, but we will be doing a presentation on our accessibility work in MuseScore. And so that I will be doing that. We'll also have a booth there for MuseScore, which we didn't last year, so that other developers, basically, that's the only people that go to this conference, but people can come visit our booth and, say hi. And so if you happen to be around Brussels, feel free to drop by in that first weekend of February, because it's free, open. I don't think there's not like any sort of registration for it or anything. Very, very, very loose. It's at some university in Brussels. FOSDEM, you can look it up, find out what you need. FOSDEM. So anyhow, I'll be there that first weekend. I think I broadcast from there, maybe, because I arrived a couple days early last year. But this time, I don't know if I will or not this year, probably not. But we'll be presenting about accessibility, and so I'm really doing yet another push to get some of this accessibility work in. So my guess is sometime in the next month, I'm gonna talk about a little more about accessibility things, because this stuff is, I don't know, it's really important. It's relevant to one segment of people, but it's hugely relevant to them, and it occupies a big part of what I work on. So I'm sure I'll be talking about that again. And I continue to take your suggestions for things. Great. Thanks for the kind words here. So if you use MuseScore with the Windows, oh, I missed a couple things back here while I was yapping. Okay, automatic Roman numerals adding. Um, so you mean like having it do an analysis of your score and add the Roman numerals for you? Yeah, that's quite I mean, that's artificial intelligence. There are plugins that can attempt to do that. The plugins that exist are before the actual Roman numeral facility. So I think they just add plain text or something, and I don't know how up to date they are. They might not run with MuseScore 3. Someone needs to do a new version of this that really does work. But in case you haven't seen the Roman numeral facility at all, I should at least show that. Add text Roman numeral analysis. There's nothing automatic about this except the formatting. I can type 1V64 and I get 464. I can type 1 or say sharp 2 diminished and get sharp 2 diminished, right? So all the sorts of things that you expect to be able to type work in Roman numeral analysis. This was new in version 3.3, but if you skip that release, then that's something you've missed. Okay, so Roman numeral analysis, yeah, making it truly automatic that's more artificial intelligence-ish. Yeah, it's a thing, but it's something that's more likely to be in a plugin. All right, so with the window smaller, yeah, I would say I only would work with MuseScore full screen because, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. However, I will also say that it's quite easy to um, just close the inspector. The inspector shortcut is F8, the palettes are F9. So I will often close them, work for a while, and then reopen them when I need them. Also, the toolbars can be closed, but that's a little more work. So at one point, I actually came up with a workspace, but it's not going to be here because I'm in. Actually, let me just go to my standard MuseScore window. Can I get there? Yes, I can. Let me just show you this because I think I still have this, and it's actually kind of cool. Workspaces are a thing, right? You've let's see if I can open the beta. Workspaces are something that you can create, and we usually think of those as just being about custom palettes, but it's much more than that. When you create a custom workspace, which you do, let me close that Start Center, with this plus button over here, it adds new workspaces to this list here. Oh, I guess I got rid of it. I had a workspace that I created that I called like page layout. I think I remember what I called it. But what I did was I created the workspace. Let's call it layout. Oh, shoot, I forgot. I meant to give it some options. So workspace, edit. When I was in this dialog, I meant to include toolbars, GUI components. That means it's going to remember these settings. So now what I can do is basically uncheck. Oh, and I have to do this one at a time, which is kind of a drag, but that's something that Martin pointed out in his video. Or did he? I think he did. I can just uncheck all of these guys and make them go away. Put input. I guess I'll keep the workspaces because well, I don't need it because I can switch using the menu. All right, make it go away too. And then I'll close these two. Check that out, right? Now that is a nice clean little setup there. And then if I want to switch workspaces again, since I closed that thing, I would have to actually go back here. So I might actually ask for it back. Let me get it back. Let me get my workspaces back. I'll put up with that amount of space. But now I can switch from that to my basic workspace. And my basic workspace is just how I left it. But then I can switch to my layout workspace, and it is how I left it. So that's something that you can do to save yourself some space. Because a lot of time when you're working, you really don't need all those other things, right? Either you're doing layouty sorts of things or maybe just entering notes. So that's a thing. Yeah, if you got a large monitor, that helps. My monitors are small. I've got like 13-inch laptops mostly that I work on. Let's see if I can catch up a little more on comments. Yeah. Well, you're welcome. Thanks, Kyle. Let's see. Alex, the chorded Roman numeral analysis should be similar. They're different sections of the menu. Are they? Add text Oh, you're right. Chord symbol, Roman numeral analysis. Well, that's because they were implemented at different times. That's really the reason. Chord, and realistically, okay, these are the ones that are like kind of basic program features that have been around for years and everyone uses. These ones down here are more specialized, I would say. Sticking, which was added at like 3.1 for percussion. Roman numeral analysis, Nashville number, which I added along with Roman numeral analysis. Figured bass, that was actually added for MuseScore 2. These are a little more specialized. We don't give them shortcuts by default, and maybe it's, I don't know. We could have moved chord symbol down here right below lyrics, and I'd have been happy to, really. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a possibility also. Um, uh, but they are similar. In fact, implementation-wise, they're the same thing. It's just a different flag that I set on the chord symbol to say whether it's a regular chord symbol or a Roman numeral analysis one. But they're handled identically in the code. Let's see. What caused you to hire Tantacruel? Okay. So uh, basically the video. That video critiquing MuseScore really, caught our attention. We started implementing his suggestions, and then I don't know who actually initiated the contact, but at some point someone reached out to him and said, "Hey, look, we've been doing some of these, implementing some of the things you suggested in that video," and he was kind of blown away. And a dialogue sort of started about saying, if you've got any other ideas, we'd love to hear them. And I think he sort of made a proposal, and I think he was thinking, I don't know, I'll put words in his mouth for him. Martin, you're not watching this, are you? I'll put words in your mouth. I'm gonna guess Martin probably made some sort of proposal, thinking of it maybe as getting a little contract to do something, and somehow it just turned from one contract to do one thing and turned into a, hey, let's just hire you. So I think that's just the way Ultimate Guitar, which is the company that owns MuseScore. I mean, MuseScore operates very autonomously. It really has no relationship to Ultimate Guitar, but Ultimate Guitar has money to spend on things. So that's essentially what happened. I mean, they don't have a ton of money. It's money not in U.S. currency. That's maybe not hard to hire American people or really anyone outside of Eastern Europe. But it is what it is. So move the mouse away, back over the same item. Text display is fine. Not sure what you're talking about. Not sure, Kyle, what you mean about moving the mouse away and then back. You mean text in here? So yeah, I'm not sure what that refers to. I've used chord symbols for yeah. Chord symbol has worked for Roman numeral analysis, and I've used it too, but I actually stopped using it in favor of lyrics because it would be possible, like if I wanted to have a Roman numeral, if I enter a chord symbol with Control K, and I would want to do flat 5, 7, it would turn into a B because it thinks a B is a B, right? It doesn't think it's flat. Chord symbols understand flat signs only if they occur where we expect flat signs to occur. So if I come here and type, hello, Control K, and I type B or E flat 7, it understands that as a flat sign. I'm not even sure if it understands V flat 7. Yeah, it's not even going to understand that because it's like V. I don't know what that is. So it only understood flat sign in the places where it expected a flat sign. So it's limited for use with Roman numerals for that reason. So yeah, the actual Roman numeral facility basically recognizes a flat sign in the places where it should be. And as something I talked about this in a previous Café when 3.3 came out, but actually that facility doesn't rely on being a chord symbol. Like I could actually enter. Oh, I need my inspector back. Okay, are we done looking at layout? I am. Let's go back to basic at least. If I change my font here to the special Roman numeral font that I actually developed called Campagna. I say I developed it. It's an open source font that I adapted for use as Roman numerals. What do I mean by adapted? Well, it means I can now type flat V. Oh, come on. Oh, I know why. That's a bug that's hopefully fixed by 3.4. We've got to fix in 4. If you're currently editing the text, changes in inspector don't work. This we thought was just, oh, that's just how it is. But no, it turns out it was a bug introduced at 3.1. There's a fix waiting to be merged. So I think that'll be in by the final release. Anyhow, let me change this to Campagna. and you'll see that now my title is rendering using that same font. So this font does the rendering for us. MuseScore doesn't actually do the fancy rendering. Which is why, basically it's a chord symbol that does nothing fancy. It just uses the font to do it. You could switch to another font if you had another one you liked better, because MuseScore is not doing special processing on this. But it does know to display it below the staff. But you can use the Campagna font. You can download it, just do a web search for it, download it, and use it in Microsoft Word or whatever other program you want. So let's see. There we go. There are 2 comments. Sorry, character limit per comment. 2 comments. Let me back up. Oh, the peculiar thing. Sorry about that. All right. So, am I going to add videos? Yeah. So it's hard for me. You guys are doing a good job of keeping ahead of me here, which I like to see. Usually, I'm used to turning back here and saying, "Oh, no comments." All right. So, am I going to add videos explaining the updates to my course? And the answer is yes. One thing is I've been doing this, right? Going into 3.2, I added a bunch of new videos explaining some of the changes that had happened, and going into MuseScore 3. For MuseScore 3.3, I think I only did 1 new video, but I added comments below some of the other videos just saying, hey, this is what's changed. Like now I'm going to have to go in and add something. I think I am going to redo the video about how to use the palettes, because now both the reorganization of the palette but also the single click thing has really changed that. But now with the navigation change coming, I might hold off until it feels more like we're done, right? So this is the conundrum that I'm in. When do I do the update, and is it just going to turn out to be obsolete in the next update? So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to be talking with Martin in the next couple of days to get a kind of a longer term view of what he's looking at redesigning, so I have an idea of which videos I can safely update without fear of them becoming obsolete soon. That's basically one of the things that I want to be learning. So yeah, I am going to be updating things, and sometimes it'll just be some text comments below a video if I think I can get away with that. Sometimes it'll mean re-recording an existing video. Sometimes it's adding a new one. All right, so now back to Kyle. The peculiar thing. Hover over an item, the tip or shortcut. Oh, you're talking about tooltips. Are you by any chance using a translated, like are you using a version other than US English? Like, are you using either UK English or some other language translation? If so, I could totally believe that the tooltip size is off because it's relying on the US English. Hey, Kari. That's my wife. Hey. Yay. From 3rd grade. Wow, you're watching in class. This is cool. Oh, yeah. So you were looking at one of the other things and click the live button. Hi, class. Hi, everyone. Okay. Finish. That's interesting. That could be related. It could be the fact that you've got the Finnish stuff going on is confusing the code that tries to size the. I don't know. I'm making stuff up. Could also just be a font thing that we're confused about the font. Could be a monitor scaling thing where that's off. Lots of things could be happening. To be honest, I would have to see it in action and play with it. I can tell you that for the last several releases, we have continually been tweaking how the scaling works for different monitor resolutions, because it's never been entirely right, and we're getting closer and closer to finally being the case that everyone sees the same thing. But it's already, it's the case that when you start MuseScore, you might well see your menus too big, too small. You might see icons too big, too small. You might see the score too big or too small. We've been trying to get this so that everyone is seeing basically the same thing, but there's still some corner cases where it doesn't work right. And so anyhow, that could be something about what's going on. 65-inch monitor. Oh, that's Keith. Wow. That's pretty amazing. Okay, well, that's the smart board. So Kari, my wife, is teaching 3rd grade, literally, like she's sitting in a 3rd grade class right now, teaching it, and we use MuseScore there. She uses it. I've used it there on a smartboard, which is basically a big giant tablet. It looks like a big screen TV that just is touch sensitive and has some other smarts to it. So it's like a big smart TV, basically. In fact, at this point, well, I guess most smart TVs are not touch sensitive. So, but if you had a smart TV, made it touch sensitive, that's essentially a smart board. Um, so anyhow, yeah, they're pretty cool. Although the one thing that is a little odd about them is because there's no like physical keyboard attached to it. I'm so used to doing everything with keyboard shortcuts that in order to adjust and use the smart board, I have to like relearn how to do things. And so I will use the mouse to do this. View, piano, keyboard. Uh, this is my favorite way to enter notes on the smart board because now I can just touch notes. Of course, I have to be in note input mode or at least have selected a note. But let's do that. Right, so that's how to enter notes on a smartboard, I think, is the most convenient way. Anyhow, so my guess is Kari's not still watching because, she does have a class to teach. Okay, but she did tell me that that the class was impressed when they were looking at the because she had posted some songs that they were working on in class to musescore.com and then made the videos from there, posted them to YouTube, and then after watching one of those YouTube, the suggested videos comes up, right? And I think one of these cafes showed up as a suggested video, and the kids were like, "Oh, MuseScore Live!" Yeah. So I think that's how they ended up stumbling on here again today. All right, so I've been going on. This has been great. I've been loving the comments, loving the questions. We've gone on a bit longer than usual, but that's fine. I don't have any specific time limit, but we do like to kind of keep these a manageable length for people actually wanting to watch these things. So I think I'm going to. Did I miss anything else? I think. Oh, okay. For a course, might be nice to add an update area before it starts. Yeah, you're right. That is an excellent idea. I do have some comment in the very first lesson, but I probably haven't updated the update area either. So I need a strategy there, is what I need. I mean, I knew when MuseScore 3 came out that our plan was to release updates faster than we did with MuseScore 2. I think I didn't fully appreciate what that would really mean. I was thinking that would really just mean bug fixes, but no, actually we're adding new features, changing things about the design at a faster rate than I anticipated. So I need to adjust is the story there. I will. Okay, so there you go. I'm going to sign off now. Next week's cafe open for topics. I'm open to suggestions. I've got a couple outstanding ones. There was one having to do with sound fonts and playback that frankly I need to learn really more about the different ways of doing things, and I would love to get Jack working before I do that one. And we have a change pending that if it gets Jack working, then I will when that change is merged, I will definitely think about doing that because if I'm going to talk about how to get like improved sounds and get interesting playback features out of MuseScore, being able to talk about using Jack with a digital audio workstation is going to be part of that discussion. So we'll wait for that to be fully operational. Okay. So I hope everyone had a great Christmas and New Year's and all that. I did. And I will catch up with everyone next week. Thanks, guys and gals.